Liverpool, one of the greatest cities in the world. When you think of Liverpool, you might think of the infamous Albert Dock, once the gateway to Britain. You might think of the historic music scene, producing the likes of Cilla Black and the Beatles. Yes, Liverpool has a story to tell, with its 2 first-class football clubs and its European Capital of Culture status in 2008, but there is a darker side to the city that has been locked away until now. Grenville Street South, located in the southern part of the city centre, is currently home to student accommodation, a construction site and some small houses while neighbouring Europe's oldest Chinatown. It is like any other street in Liverpool, but it wasn't always this way. Over 150 years ago in 1849, Grenville Street South was officially known as Leveson Street, and it looked completely different. To understand how, we must take to the skies. Amy Brown, a local history teacher, is here to tell you more of this fascinating story.
Before Grenville Street South stood on the end of Chinatown, it was formerly known as Leveson Street. In March of 1849, pregnant with her 3rd child, Anna Himrinson lived at number 20 with her husband John and their children Henry, George and John Alfred. Her husband was away on a shipping voyage, and so to generate some extra income, Anne let out the spare room. The lodger was an Irishman by the name of Maurice Gleeson, who had paid a week's rent in advance.
Little did Anne Himrinson know, within 24 hours, she would be dead.
The day after Gleeson moved in, on March 28th, moaning was heard coming from inside number 20, and a pair of feet could be seen lying across the hall. Neighbours broke down the door to find Miss Himrinson, one of her sons, and their maid barely alive and had been beaten with a poker. In the cellar was the youngest child, John, who had had his throat slit. Mrs. Himrinson, her unborn daughter and her eldest son died in hospital. However, the maid, Mary Parr, was barely alive. Gleeson fled the scene and went to his other lodgings at 44 Porter Street, where he changed his clothes after washing his blood-stained clothes in Toxteth Park. He secured a passage to America for £3 and planned to flee. He was hauled in front of authorities after trying to sell a gold watch and was identified by Mary Parr before she died 6 days later.
During the trial at St George's Hall, Gleeson showed little to no remorse, instead refusing 3 visits from the church and threatening officers with a hammer that had been left behind by builders. Witness reports came together to paint a picture of a gruesome and cold-blooded murder. The trial was over quickly, with the judge not needing any further time to deliberate, instead sentencing Gleeson to death by hanging. During the 1800s, a public hanging was a spectacle event. For some, it was a day out full of singing and entertainment. Nobody, however, could have predicted the popularity of Gleeson's hanging. While most reports suggest that 50,000 people were in attendance, others claim that number was closer to 100,000. What we do know is that special train services ran, shuttling people from as far as Lancashire, and the day was a highlight for many. We also know that the hanging was performed by 70-year-old George Howard, who had travelled from York. Howard botched the hanging, meaning that Gleeson's hood fell off and his eyes could be seen bulging as his face turned purple, causing people in the crowds to faint. It was 15 minutes before Gleeson stopped breathing. Captain John Henrichson returned from sea to the terrible news that his family had been slaughtered in his absence. In his distressed state, he decided to stay with family in Hull, and little is known about his movements after. Desperate to change the reputation and falling value of Leveson Street, on December 28, 1850, the road was officially renamed Grenville Street South. The murders at Leveson Street left a lasting impact on an otherwise respectable middle-class street in Liverpool. The story was told for years to come and was recently included in an article for the Liverpool Echo. There was even a song written about the horrific events by a Liverpudlian singer-songwriter. Yes, Liverpool might be one of the greatest cities, with its many museums full of vast history that champions an incredible place. But what you won't find is the untold tales of horror that line the streets, for Liverpool, like many other locations, will only put its best foot forward.